Let's get started.
After the death of her father, Tula and her family are emotionally adrift, but decide to have a reunion with their non-American family members in Greece all the same. With cultural and generational differences affecting their emotional journeys, will the family be able to come together and rekindle their love for one another?
Rebecca, we both wanted to see this movie. I know you and I, in the past, we'd seen 1 and 2.
That's correct.
Even though it had been a long time, actually. 1 came out in 2002, and you were pretty young back then.
To put this in perspective, the most famous cast member at the time of the original movie premiering was from a TV show called Northern Exposure.
Remember that?
The most famous cast member in this movie is from NSYNC.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, and it's funny, too. This movie, back in the day, so number 1 came out in 2002. Budget was really small for Hollywood. $5 million. Made $368 million. So many people have seen this movie.
This movie is iconic in the rom-com landscape.
Well, and that's true. To talk about the genre it's a rom-com, and I remember, it's funny because part of it is thinking back, like, okay, what do you remember most? Remember the acting, remember the story, the love story. Really sweet, actually, as you're talking about the rom-com. But you know what I remember the most?
The jokes.
The jokes and the Windex.
Oh my gosh, the Windex. The Windex is iconic. Also vegetarian references.
Right, for her husband and the vegetarian reference. So that goes pretty far back. Number 2 was 2016. These movies, at the time between these movies is interesting to me because we're talking about 2002, and at the time of this recording, we're in 2023. So 21 years ago. And people are anxiously waiting for this installment. So number 3.
It's interesting to me because it's not something that I expected, but it's coming. I'm like, okay, I'm interested.
Well, and it's interesting because you're in your late 20s and way back in the day, and you're still interested in seeing the movie. You still were like, oh, let's go see it. Even though the trailer gives a few spoilers, I would say.
I would agree with you. I didn't have as many fond memories of the second one, but I thought that they touched on some very intergenerational topics that, frankly, should be. It's so
Agreed.
easy for rom-coms to fall into this trap of, oh, the main couple doesn't love each other anymore. And I never have to worry about that with these movies.
No, and even though I would say there are parts of this movie that feel predictable, would you agree with that, or expected?
Yes. Troporific.
Troporific. Great phrase. I enjoyed it, even though I knew where it was going. Family values, talking about the importance of family. I think there were some Greek stereotypes. Obviously, if you're not Greek, some of the things may be over your head, but I don't think it was meant to be over your head to lose the audience. It's just, different families,
it's
different
author
cultures.
appeal, honestly.
Yeah.
Nia's writing from a Greek perspective, so of course she's going to talk about stereotypes and things of that nature that would appeal to a Greek audience.
Well, and I think other families could relate to that. Overly intrusive families, the young daughter, she's younger than you. However, I'm sure you can relate to the parent piece, the aunts, the uncle piece.
Just to clarify, I'm not a parent.
Correct. Well, right. And the crazy uncle piece. I think that there are some things that are just universal, and I respect her for going there and doing it actually very sweetly.
I never was worried throughout this movie of, oh gosh, they're just going to go for it to skewer him. It felt like, I've lived this, let's make fun of it.
And that's how it felt. It felt very sweet. And you're talking about the main character, right? Nia and her husband. They still love each other. They're still very much attracted to each other. And I like the part because her husband is not Greek. And obviously that could be a problem with an entire family that's Greek. And the expectation is you'll marry someone Greek. He was very well threaded into this family.
Yeah, the first conflict of the original movie was, how is Nia's boyfriend, who became her husband?
Correct. Spoiler alert. 21 years later. Sorry, we're spoiling it for you if you haven't seen it.
How is Nia's husband going to acclimate to this?
Correct. 21 years later, what does that now look like?
And there's still some cultural differences that they do touch on, but they do respect and love him.
And I appreciated that. So it wasn't he was on the outside, or they were making fun of him, or he was just always feeling as if he wasn't accepted. He was very well accepted into the family. The other part that I really appreciated is it wasn't as if 1 and 2 and 3 all happened in the course of 3 days. It
Oh my
truly
gosh.
was over the course of years. Her mother, they talk about her declining health. The father, we hear about what has since happened to him. So there's a real part where we are now with them today. The daughter, she's there, and she's older, and she's in college, and she has a love interest, and life continues to move forward. And I think that is actually hard to do in a movie.
I think it's harder to do in a space that focuses on the very young or the very old. This is very
good.
much there's something that will touch on for most of the audience.
Well, and the other part that I appreciate, we were talking about, the length of time that had happened during the course of this movie. And I appreciated that Nia came on before the movie started. I think it was 5 minutes. You were saying about 5 minutes. I think maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But she recapped My Big Fat Greek Wedding 1 and the second. One thing that did grab my attention was we went on a Friday later evening, and it was packed. The theater was packed.
I was really shocked because, first of all, I'm trying to find my seat, so I'm somewhat looking up.
Sure.
I look up and I'm expecting maybe like 10, 15 people.
Sure.
Sea of people.
Well, okay, when looking at the cinema community that chose to go see this movie, what did you notice? Because I know what I noticed.
I noticed the audience skewed primarily female and just a bit older. But there was still some people around my age. Nobody super young, but definitely like late 20s and above.
Well, and I think late 20s would be I agree with that. I think that would be the youngest. And I know being in my 50s, I thought, maybe people 40s, 50s. There were people 10, 20 years older than I was. And I just thought that's so great because we all need movies to go see. We need movies that we love and we enjoy and we're excited about. And to see a different demographic than even our next movie that we're going to be discussing, that so many people really liked it and there was buzz. I was laughing. A member of our cinema community said that, he'd used the men's room and he came back out and he said, they're talking about it in there. The men enjoyed this movie.
Everyone I've brought up the fact that this movie exists has gotten excited about it.
Which says something great. And so Nia Vardalos had written the movie, acted in the movie, directed the movie.
She's basically like Orson Welles at this point.
Oh my goodness, she did it all, and I just thought that was pretty great. The movie is PG-13.
Yes, there's one moment of brief topless nudity.
Correct. And it's to me it's blink and you miss it. There is some suggestive material, so again, I think that brings it to the PG-13.
I think it's definitely earned its PG-13.
I would agree.
If you're a parent, you might want to see this one beforehand just to make sure, for your family, what fits, what doesn't fit.
Well, in suggestive material and blink, to me, is a whole lot different than a hard PG-13. And I agree with you. I think every family needs to decide for themselves. Each individual needs to decide for themselves. However, it wasn't heavy.
No, there are some PG-13 movies I'm like, you're veering awfully close to an R-rated movie.
Correct. And as we said, this was a positive movie. It was a very loving movie toward family and Greek culture. And the phrase you use a lot is the love letter, right? It was a love letter to families and Greek culture and callbacks to the first and second.
There's definitely a lot of jokes that pay off here, so I would recommend watching the first two.
I would agree with that. Do we have any questions from the box?
Why don't you talk about the different audience types? Maybe who the movie really will hit with and who do you think might want to skip this movie?
I would say, based on a little bit earlier of what we had said, just to clarify maybe a little bit more, probably an older demographic. And I wouldn't say I would say probably teens or preteens, maybe a little bit bored, or it may feel a little bit too familiar. It may feel like, oh my gosh, that's my family. I don't really want to go pay money and go see my family. But one thing that I did notice was there were multiple generations sitting together, 3 generations, 60s, 70s, 40s, 50s, and 20-ish, I would say.
Late 20s.
Correct. So I think that there is an element to that was interesting. But I honestly was surprised that there were men and women. And as we had said, there was a buzz and there was some energy in the theater around that. But I don't recall a movie that we have seen more recently that was that full with that older demographic.
The closest I can think of is maybe 80 for Brady.
Oh, that would be a good example. That would be a great example.
That definitely skewed a bit older. 40s and above were the primary audience for this movie.
And being older than 40s, right? Being in my mid 50s, I enjoyed the movie. However, when the first one came out, I was 30-ish, somewhere in the 30s.
I remember the first one coming out and we'd have like late 20 somethings talking about it.
That's correct. So it may have had more of a universal appeal, but I would say men and women would probably enjoy it. However, I think more women probably enjoyed it.
This movie's going to hit what I call the Mamma Mia quotient.
Oh, okay.
These are people that are interested in stories that sometimes delve into very difficult topics, but they want a bit of fluff and entertainment with it too.
Correct. And it did, for a rom-com, it did have more substance than I would say some of the typical. Do we have any questions from the box?
If a Big Fat Greek Wedding 4 came out, do you think you would go see it? Do you think you'd want to see the story continue?
The franchise hasn't completely soured for me yet, but I think that there's some stuff that they need to work on.
I think they are planning for a 4, just given the nature of the daughter and her love connection and moving in that direction. I had the feeling that they were going, well, wait for a wedding 4. And no spoilers, but there was a wedding in this one also.
It's not what you expect.
It's not what you expect. Rebecca, 5 moths are flying very close to me.
They like stalking me.
And they're stalking you, and they want to know where should they land for my Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
Well, first off, don't land on my cardigan. I really like this one. I'm going to say 2 and a wing for this one.
Okay. And main reason?
It's definitely better than 2. It's a little bit above average, but it's not as great as the first one.
Okay. Do you think it's worth a watch?
I think it's worth a watch if you're already invested in the franchise.
Okay, so the average Anthony would say what to this movie, do you think?
I think the average Anthony would look at this as a nice fluffy date night piece.
Ah, okay, so good date night movie.
Yeah, watch the first 2 during the day, go see the third one at night.
Wow, it's a Greek wedding marathon. Wedding, and they're in Greece. I think for me, a bit higher, I would say a 3, a solid 3. Acting was solid. The writing was solid. The fact that I wanted to see the third one, even though I couldn't quite remember the second one, enjoyed the first one. And as you had said, there's some really mature themes, and I appreciated that. A 4 feels a bit heavy to me. As you said, there could be a little bit tightening of the script. There could be a little bit more in the acting department that would, intrigue you or pull you in a little bit more. I think the biggest part that was hard for me is if you like predictable movies or if you like movies that you know where they're going, and as you had said, the callbacks and things, if you enjoy movies like that, you're going to enjoy this movie a lot. However, for me, I enjoy some variety, some change, some unexpected, and it didn't have enough of that for me to say, oh, it's a solid 4. I would definitely go see it.
So I have a question for you.
Of course.
So you're saying it feels seamless within the franchise.
Yes.
But on its own, it's an movie.
It's just kind of an but it does stand on its own. It really does. But I agree with the average. It's above average to me in a lot of respects, which is why it would be a 3. And to me, it is worth a watch. It is a good date night movie. It is positive. It felt kind to each person and definitely validated the family, which I think is great at this point. And multi-generations, it's not just, me and my husband or me and my kids. It's the grandparents, the aunts and the uncles, despite their, character defects, their challenges, their, idiosyncrasies, it was very cohesive. And I appreciated that.
I never felt like anybody was being actively malicious. It felt
No.
kind of teasing in some ways.
It did, which a good, healthy family, that's what that would feel like. Thank you for watching this Cocoon Cast clip. This clip was taken from our weekly show, which is released on Saturdays.
If you enjoyed this video, click the link or head over to our main channel for more movie reviews, Hollywood news with a slice of snark. Thank you for watching, and remember,
Movies are
better together.